Politics, religion, and money. The forbidden topics of 1,000 upon 1,000 of holiday dinners. Forbidden and yet inexorably linked and inescapably relevant. Today, they are linked in more obscure and nebulous ways than the times of Isaiah, the psalmist, Paul, or Jesus. In Isaiah, we have a people contemplating their imminent return from political and religious exile. Isaiah is a book that can be broken into three parts. The first third of Isaiah is Isaiah and his people embattled and entering into exile, pleading for God's help. The second third is Isaiah's people writing in his style within their exile, within their wilderness. And the third part is the next generation, seeing the Babylonians ousted from Israel and replaced by a ruler by the name of Cyrus of Persia. And he is an occupying force that is much more willing to allow the people and the lands he is in to exist and worship in their own culture and in their own way. So to say that they are overjoyed at this prospect of returning to Jerusalem to worship as they have been directed would not fully encapsulate their excitement. They have declared this Cyrus, this stranger and foreigner, to be anointed, to be Christos. That is a powerful honor to bestow on him. When I was initially writing this sermon, I accidentally wrote out the word anxiety instead of exile. And I'm not really a big fan of Freud, but there is something to be said for these well-timed word slips. In my mind, I suspect I was thinking of our own return from the isolation and anxiety of lockdown, and the way many of us are still in exile and still feeling that anxiety. Our psalm today also explores the worship of God as it is related to a political victory. It never occurred to either Isaiah or the psalmist that God would not be at work in these wars and in these politics. But we live in a time and a culture that holds in high regard the idea that our personal religious beliefs cannot be imposed on others by a political policy. And for good reason. The government should not be interfering with individual practices of faith in the ways it has historically, through oppression, exclusion, and murder. And practitioners of faith should not have oversized power to limit the freedoms of others who believe differently. But that does not mean that our personal politics are not informed by our faith. And it certainly does not mean that the gospel is not political. Not in a time where you can be arrested for feeding the hungry. Though this is a conclusion that is often drawn in response to today's gospel. Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's. Or more commonly referenced in this translation, render to Caesar that which is Caesar's. This line in particular has a well-traveled history of justifying any kind of political system the user wants to justify. Contextually, this passage is the beginning of the crescendo of the ruling class resisting Jesus' message. He so threatens the status quo, the current power dynamics, that he has united the Herodians, who support Herod and paying taxes, and the Pharisees, who are devoted to the purity of the scriptures and would like to not pay taxes to Rome. On its face, it was a manipulative and bad faith question. Jesus does not fall for it. It's a yes or no question in which the answers yes or no would lead him into dangerous territory. He returns to these men a statement so ambiguous, it leaves them shocked, and I think a little frustrated. In this moment, they did not achieve what they had hoped for, but one day they would. One day they would find a way to rid themselves of this meddlesome man. Though much like this interaction, that plan will not yield the results they had hoped for. Once I got past the initial reactions to this passage, the easy bipartisan applications, I thought of something said in my seminary's panel on MLK and reparations. Dr. Catherine Meeks, the executive director for the Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing, was discussing people's preoccupation with the numbers the school had set aside for reparations and for how it might be distributed. Virginia Theological Seminary, that I attended, was built by enslaved people. And today, the descendants of those enslaved people are celebrated and remunerated. She said to the people asking about this, if you're asking how about the number, if you're asking how can we afford this, how will it be distributed, you have already missed the point. What matters is that it is happening. What matters is why it is happening. What matters is that someone has finally taken the time to confront the harm caused in the past and directed their stewardship towards rectifying a grave sin. It matters more what the school is doing than the specific numbers. When we're thinking of this passage as a way to justify taxes or to justify faith in the law, in the government, we are entirely missing the point, not unlike Jesus' interrogators. They are trying to trick Jesus to serve their own purposes. In the end, they will get what they think they want when Jesus is crucified as a political dissident. But this interrogation does not go the way they want it. Jesus has won the battle, if not the war, or so they think. We do a similar thing often with the Bible. We approach it in an effort to try and make it apply to what we already believe to be the right thing to do. What Jesus is telling us, though, is not exactly the right action to take. He very rarely gives us step-by-step instructions. He is telling us that if our priorities align with what he has taught us, what is done will be the right thing. So if we enter into conversation and community and politicking with the intent of being right instead of doing right, with the intent of winning the small prize we want instead of the real reward we need, we will continue to miss the point. What does he mean then? If not that Caesar can have all the money, if not that taxes are good, if not that one must respect authoritarian rule? The answer is not found in what is Caesar's, but in what is God's. Mostly what Jesus is doing here is circumventing pedantic shenanigans. But like most things Jesus said, there is more meaning than we can at once comprehend. Jesus does not support nationalistic division. On the contrary, he is in fact saying that such human boundaries do not matter to God. The divisions created by humanity to deny the humanity of God's creation do not belong to God. So if you are looking at which side has done the least harm, or which side has the greater legal claim, you're missing that all involved are beloved by God. The true joy of the people of Isaiah returning was not the conquering of the Babylonians, but of the returned opportunity to live and worship in community safely. The Bible is filled with people who miss the point. The disciples are often caught quibbling over honors and details and the exact right way to do something. All along, Jesus keeps trying to tell us this one thing: give to God what is God's, and it is all God's. What God cares about is God's people, not the specifics of the money made by God's people. God's image is not on man-made money. We have created a system. We live within a system that requires us to contribute financially to the things we want to exist, to the things that matter to us. The church needs your contributions to exist. That is simply the world we live in. But the attention we sometimes give to the specific numbers runs the risk of us missing the point. What I am asking you to do is to think about what matters to you. And if the things that matter help you feel closer to God. The coin is only the emperor's because we believe it to be the emperor's. But here in God's house, when we discuss the emperor's money, we must think not of the numbers, but of those we love, the images of God. This is stewardship. Caesar is the one who takes what he believes to be his. God already knows what belongs to God. And we owe so much more to God than to Caesar. And God asks so much less of us. What is Caesar's is what matters to Caesar so much that he put his face on it. And what is God's, is what mattered so much to God. We were created in God's image. Amen.